So, our first speaker is ready to come up here. We have Daniel giving you a talk on privacy and the law and all sorts of very important stuff you should probably care more about than you do. So, welcome, Daniel.
Actually, I'm not going to be speaking about law at all because that's boring as hell, and we're not here for that. What I'm going to be speaking on is basically the importance of your community and our liberty and freedoms today. But we don't want to start out so harsh, so I'm going to start with a few of the things I want to talk about overall. First, who am I? Where did I come from? So what are some of our privacy fears? Why you should have fears? A lot of you know this, but it's nice to reiterate it. Privacy abuse history, so it doesn't sound like I'm making this stuff up and being a conspiracy theorist. NSA scandals, just to stay in touch with what's going on. Privacy legislation that I pushed. What can states do since the feds won't do anything except abuse our rights? Why Montana, which is where I'm from, and what is the firewall of freedom? What is our last resort? But first, where's Montana? I know you guys know this. Montana is in red. It's also because we're more politically right. California's in blue. That's where we're at right now for those of you who are lost. Eh? Eh? All right, my background. My family actually moved in from Oregon in 1994. It was overpopulated. They wanted to get out. They wanted to raise their kids in a free environment. It was great. My grandparents are Russians who literally escaped communism and moved to Iran, where my dad was born. So I have some history on government takeover in that area. And then the other grandparents are Italian, one who fought with the United States against the Japanese as an Italian immigrant. So some pretty good history right there on what is important, what you have to fight for, and when you need to fight for it. I graduated from Roundup High School. I just want to put that out there all the time anywhere I speak because no one's heard of Roundup High School, a town of 2,000 people in a 30-mile radius with more cows than people. It's quite fascinating that I'm even here today. I went to the University of Montana, just a public university, 3 majors and a political science minor. After that, I implemented state government tax systems. So I saw what went behind the scenes in state departments, and it was a joke, especially the laws being passed that didn't make sense, that were on the policy to tax you guys more and more. It was not my kind of career I wanted to do. They tried to make me a programmer, and I'm more of a social guy, so that's why I'm speaking in front of you guys, apparently. Came back to Montana, and I ran for office. So here's just one question. Who here, and you have to raise your hand if you think so, who here, thank you, I love the guys in the back. Who here believes they have a role to play in politics, policy, government? Who here actually thinks that that's something that they have an important role in? So about half of you. That's actually an impressive amount. We'll talk about why it's probably most of all of you who may have a role. I was most concerned about is our government is obtaining all this data possible. Again, I was always, what happens if they collect this data? Now it is, we know that they're collecting it. That's fine, that's great, until you get to the next point where you got to think about human nature. To err is human, to forgive divine. I know everybody in here has done something stupid in their life because I know I've done quite a few stupid things. Yeah. Last night, some of you guys probably broke a few laws. You know what? You'll learn from it one day, maybe, maybe not. But the fact that what you did last night or in your past may be recorded somewhere to be found out at a later time to be used against you is the biggest threat and concern that people should have. To use information against an opponent is politics. And what is politics about? Does anybody know? Power. Money is about power, because in the end result, it's about power. So the last one is power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So you give these people enough power, and they're going to want more. You give them the ability to abuse a system that was meant for the idea of security, and they will abuse it. So has this happened before? Yes, it has. J. Edgar Hoover was the head of the FBI and the organization prior for about 48 years. He transformed the FBI into his private secret police force. And I'll read this quote from President Harry S. Truman. "We want no Gestapo or secret police. FBI is tending in that direction. They're dabbling in sex life scandals and plain blackmail. J. Edgar Hoover would give his right eye to take over, and all congressmen and senators are afraid of him." When you have elected officials like myself fearful in an individual who is swaying my vote, you no longer have a democracy. One other thing is they tried to, with his data, he tried to derail Martin Luther King's stances with his sex life scandals. By 1960, the FBI had subversive files on some 432,000 Americans. This is history. This was before any of this technology happened. Hoover was created. Hoover used blackmail on politicians, including 883 files on senators and 772 files on congressmen. Most of these were shredded, but here's an interesting example of what was contained. You may be interested in the following information. Name withheld said she had spent the afternoon of 3 June 1959 with Senator, name withheld, in his private office. She also said she had sexual intercourse with the senator during the afternoon on the couch in the senator's office. Well, that is expected in politics, so, but the fact that he would present these files saying, oh, you want to look into what the FBI is doing? How would I let this go and be released? And all of a sudden, oh, this senator, this wasn't his top priority anymore. He had more important things to do. Watergate Scandal. This is the, let me go back one. This was the example of one individual getting all this power and abusing it in our system. Here is an example of politics abusing data collection, which was done in June 17, 1972. Most of you may know this, but 5 men were arrested at 2:30 trying to bug the offices of the Democratic National Committee at the Watergate Hotel. Because you know what? Information is the most useful thing in politics. If we know something about the other guy, they're going to expose it right before everybody starts voting to derail them. Well, now that we all have, again, 12 years of history on us, expect that to happen. There are very few noble individuals in politics today, especially at the DC level. This event actually prompted Montana to have the data privacy clause in the state's constitution. And then let's just do the historic abuse on how a state gathered information. The Stasi, which was Eastern Germany, they collected enough paper to fill more than 100 miles of shelves, and they indexed and cross-referenced 5.5 million names. Hundreds of thousands of unofficial employees were basically ratting out each other for money, for promotions, to and started up by the government. Basically, this is the amazing thing is they only could tap 40 phones at a time because of a lack of equipment and technology, and that was still enough to keep an entire nation at bay for a while anyway, for decades. So let's look at it because pictures are a lot more amusing than words. Here is what the area of the Stasi filing cabinets amounts to, which is basically a terminal at the Salt Lake City International Airport. Okay. It's this one. This, and it's a little blurry, but I'll read it. The one on to a few weeks later, we learned about information about government partnerships with companies revealed, including Microsoft. Now, when government puts enough pressure on companies to act in a certain way, that's more fascism. A few months later, we learned about NSA employees who were spying on ex-lovers. So there's one of your first abuses of the system. A week later, the black budget of the intelligence community is released, which is $52.6 billion for 2013. That's a lot of money. A few days later, we learned that AT&T calling records database used by the DEA goes back 20 years. And a few weeks after that, we learned that the NSA stores metadata millions of web users for up to a year, only because of storage issues. They would store it longer, but they run out of space. That's embarrassing. October 2nd, NSA tracked cell phone location of Americans for up to 2 years. This is the one that I kind of honed in on during the last session I'll talk about later. October 30th, the NSA breaks into Google, Yahoo data centers, and does it without them knowing. But interestingly enough, we learned recently that Google was agreeing to work with the NSA as well. So that one kind of gets tricky. Were they only sharing some information and the rest they weren't sharing was being stolen? December 4th, the NSA was collecting 5 billion records of mobile phone location daily, and January 16th, the NSA was collecting millions of texts. I don't know why that wasn't one of the first ones, because we already know they're recording our phone calls. February 7th, 20% to 30% of all calls are being recorded. Again, because of storage issues. That's sad. Here's the one I like to use and put it out there, because this is the most important thing that can affect our future. November 26th, the NSA and you can apply it to any habit, from my friends looking up how to make homemade guns, to porn habits, to whatever, to how to hack things that could be considered not legal. The National Security Agency has been gathering records of online sexual activity and evidence of visits to pornographic websites as part of a proposed plan to harm the reputations of those whom the agency believes are radicalizing others through speeches, according to a top secret NSA document. So this could be me radicalizing you. The document provided by Edward Snowden identifies how personal vulnerabilities can be learned through electronic surveillance and then exploited to undermine a target's credibility, reputation, and authority. This has been going on. This exists today. Okay, so this is the only technical part I'll really get into. It'll be pretty quick. This is the third-party doctrine, which easily enough says that it addresses voluntary and compelled disclosure of stored wire and electronic communications and transactional records. Basically, it says if you use a third-party provider, you give up your privacy, your right of the Fourth Amendment protection with that information. The problem I have with that is none of my constituents know that. When I get elected, I try to talk to as many of them as possible, meaning I knock on their doors. I knocked on my district's door 1.5 times. No one knew that they have given the permission of their information being shared. Does that make them, maybe uninformed? Does that mean it should be their fault? No. If they don't know this, that is not their fault. It's not like I should go tell, hey, you're giving this up. The assumption is what I'm basing on as a politician on behalf of my constituents. So let's focus back on Montana. Why the hell am I here? I heard that. A hacker starts out as one of my close friends. Montana, we have a citizen legislature who serves the people. He suggested I look into privacy issues right after I got elected. There's a huge void of protecting our privacy in politics, especially with now the profit of data. No one wants there to be any lines of what is right and what is wrong. They want it to be an open area of obtain, market, sell. So basically, that's where if the government doesn't outline your rights, do not expect those rights to exist. Expect them to be taken. And that's why the Bill of Rights was there in the first place. Again, we have the right of privacy in Montana's Constitution. which said, well, if the right of privacy is in Montana, we better enact it in policy or else it's going to be ignored. And the ultimate question we tried discussing was, who owns this data? So we're going to talk about, I've spoken on this one quite a bit, of HB 400, the legislation I pushed that basically nearly and still may have ruined my future political goals because of the relationships I cut off with special interests immediately. This was all prior to Edward Snowden's NSA leak. So Edward Snowden, NSA, June 5th and 6th, I was doing this in January, 5 months before, trying to push privacy legislation to protect people's rights. It would have been considered the Privacy Bill of Rights, and it focused on legislation that implied the information belongs to the individual. Data subjects must be given notice when information is collected. Personal information may not be collected without consent, and personal information may only be used for the purposes stated. So this information belongs to you, not those who can collect it. And if they want to collect it, they have to get your permission. I had 37 signatures. In Montana, we have 100 representatives, 50 senators. I had 37 signatures, mostly from the Judiciary Committee on behalf of this bill. So I walk into committee to have my bill heard, and it's the Privacy Bill of Rights. It would have been the first one in the country. It would have been the domino effect of privacy. If we pass it in one state, it will pass in more. I walk in that room, and I'm a conservative Republican legislator who's about limited government in every angle. And I walk in, and every single business lobbyist is standing in that room, and I have it packed. And they're just ready to stand up and tell the committee how bad this is for business, Montana, how anti-business I am, how out of line I am as a freshman legislator trying to pass something on behalf of my constituents. We have the Montana Retail Association, Montana Telecommunications Association, multiple insurance companies, auto dealers, bankers, hospitals, Chamber of Commerce, Montana Collectors Association, Montana Data Association. It was amazing. If that room would have blown up, all the problems in Montana would have gone away immediately. So I wasn't, yes?
What is a Montana Collectors Association?
I think it was debt collectors, if I'm correct.
Repeat the questions, I guess, if they're going to come to the back.
Who are the Montana Collectors Association? I think it was debt collectors. Proponents. So I was there. There were about, I think, 30 people ready to put me in my place, humiliate me, which they were basically successful in doing. Who was on my side? It was me, and I was told by everybody, don't do this bill. It's stupid. It's going to ruin you. Don't do it. So I did it. But it was really nice. I walked in there, and I had two proponents. I had my hacker friend, and I had the ACLU, a group I never even thought about, especially being from the more conservative right. And they were the two who spoke on my behalf, and it was awesome. I now have a really good relationships with the ACLU on data privacy, so it was a good start for that. But still, it was kind of sad when after that next week you didn't really want to go anywhere because everybody put you in your place a little bit. So what are some of the consequences of HB 400? I got the Order of the Black Helicopter Award because I was considered a little bit crazy for being so concerned about data collection. Outstanding conspiracy theory creation from the man in the yellow hat. Thank you. That was from a fellow representative. He also gave me a black helicopter I had on my desk for the rest of the session. The focus of the 2013 legislation continued, though. The HB 400 did not pass, and some of my closest friends basically thought my political future, all possibilities were screwed, that I went way too far, I was way too married to this legislation, and I needed to take a few steps back. And then I heard other people who say, I have nothing to hide, why were you pushing this? It's not that important. And the whole concept I had to keep trying to apply and educate people on was, you may not have anything to hide, and good for you for being a perfect individual, but you still have the right to hide it. And that didn't always work in people's minds. And so I tried to also say, fearing making mistakes, especially younger, is a form of self-censorship. I know I learned from my mistakes, and I've done a lot of stupid things. I'm the only politician who claims not to be perfect. And you know what? It's true. I'm not perfect. We're not perfect. And sometimes making stupid mistakes, we learn a lot about ourselves, about life. It's kind of what makes, I think, our country great. And self-censorship occurs when you're fearful of what you may do now will hurt you in the future. And then the last one is always a little bit more extreme, but I think right to the point that, remember, the Germans had nothing to hide until they were trying to hide their neighbors. So don't deny yourself the right to hide anything. HB 603 was the next one. Again, I'm trying to make it as untechnical and straight to the point. This was a bill a senator who was a Democrat has said, hey, you know what, you really got beat on this bill. How about you try something a lot smaller? He came up to me and he said, okay, this is one we're going to try to do. So I got to sponsor a bill that required law enforcement to obtain a search warrant before being able to collect location information from electronic devices. Was it all the information? No, it's only location information. Certain devices is very narrow to the point and is also undefeatable in the sense of this is a common sense bill. Why wouldn't we pass it? It was short, simple, one page, and emergency opt-outs of life-threatening situations, permission of the owner in order to respond to 911 calls. It was first in the nation and has since been used as model legislation, and I know Utah just passed it. I think they're the fourth. Utah and Maine have passed it. One other state's passed it, and other states have tried to pass it. A sad thing that's happened with this bill, though, recently I was talking to a representative from South Carolina. They had a lot of law enforcement agencies say this is a horrible bill, and if you want to support child pornography, support this bill. And you know what? It's not that important for them to try to get this bill passed, so they killed it in committee because they don't want to be tied to child pornography for the re-election, because the re-election is more important than anything like this that's lower level, low on the priority list. Does it stop that, though, is the real question. No, you get a search warrant, and then that location information is still obtainable. So, no, but they weren't ready to die on a stake for this issue. So what did HB 603 do for me? From being considered almost unelectable, they're trying to look for people to primary during the last session already, to 2 months later. Did you know Montana was a leader on privacy laws? Neither did Montana, from the Washington Post. I woke up from a nap I was taking. I was not proud, and the guy called me, and I was like playing off. I wasn't actually taking a nap at that time. And he asked me, did you know this? I was like, oh, no, I didn't know that. I did not know it would be a headline for the Washington Post. With Montana's lead, states may demand warrants for cell phone data. New York Times. If you don't want the government to spy on you, move to Montana. All right, that's not true, but it makes Montana look good, so I'll take that headline from yahoo.com. And then this one was good. Meet the Montana lawmaker who's been called the face of online privacy rights in the U.S. Also a little far, but I'll take it. And I also afterwards I was interviewed by Glenn Beck on his TV station. They flew me down to speak on behalf of this issue, which I don't really care where you are politically. He said everybody, Democrats and Republicans who supported this type of legislation, good on them, which is cool to hear when it's from both sides of the aisle, and he's the one saying it. The last thing was, recently I was awarded a Forbes 30 Under 30 award, which is crazy coming from a small town, being a guy who just didn't like the system and wanted to stand up against it. Oh yeah, and some memes. And then Montana said, you can't spy on us. So, and then just for the people who are on the other side of the aisle, they've made it fair. Okay, so we're going to bring it back to Montana now. Why is Montana relevant? It's a great question. There's 1 million people there. Why am I here speaking to you about this? I'll bring it down to a level I hope that makes a lot of sense. Is Montana donation limits, right now, mine are $170. If I get 100 max donors, I can likely win my race. It's very simple. California donation limits are about $4,000. So, you know what? My mom and my college buddies, they can afford to donate to me, and trust me, I make them donate to me. In California, people like me have no chance unless I can self-fund, unless I do have 100 people who can donate $4,000. And can anybody here donate $4,000 to a campaign? Just, just randomly, it won't hurt your budget? No, that's what I thought. Then we're talking later. Like I said, a Montana house race costs $15,000 to $25,000. A California house race costs $400,000 to $500,000, and it can go lower, but a competitive one will cost about that much. We have term limits, 4 sessions per house, so 8 years in the House, 8 years in the Senate, termed out. One thing that did surprise me was California had term limits as well of 12 years total, which I think is more recent. So that's a good thing because you always get people coming in. One thing with term limits is if you know you're going to end in a few years, you don't mind standing up a little bit taller for issues people in other areas where they don't have term limits will say, it's not worth not getting reelected for. Me, if I don't get reelected, screw it. I got the rest of my life to live. These guys, they got their pensions to gather. So Montana again, why? Let's see what the next one is. Okay, why is it important? One thing that Montana has, besides that, is very libertarian-minded legislators on both sides of the aisle. I got the far left who completely agree on these privacy concerns along with the far right. And weirdly enough, that's what makes up the majority of the House and the Senate. The middle, the moderates, I mean, some of them are like, well, it's a good concept for security. We shouldn't limit who can gather this access. And so that's kind of what I deal more in the middle. But these guys have principle on your rights, and these guys have principle on your rights, and this seems to be one of the few issues I can get the far left and the far right together on the same page with, and that's awesome. I recently spoke a few times with the ACLU to the Tea Party. You get those guys in the same room not trying to kill each other, and I think you just accomplished something. Texas is trying to do the same thing now because they spoke about it nationally on trying to get these groups together because they have something that they can work on and get past. Who would have known it took a 26-year-old and the ACLU lobby person to put these ideas together on who we're going to speak to. So we have a very big possibility of passing legislation that will protect and be the first in the nation out of Montana. That's a big concept that a lot of people aren't realizing yet that I want people to realize because, again, if we pass it there, we can pass it anywhere. Because a lot of the things they said in committee hearing was, it's never been done before. It doesn't work. No one else has done it. If no one else is doing it, there's probably a good reason why. Well, you know what? I think I can help make it happen so everybody else can make it happen. And it doesn't mean it's only Montana who can do it. I just think that since I'm there and I'm creating the relationships, it's very possible. So what are some of the 2015 legislative goals for our session? One of the first, these aren't all mine, but we're all working together on it. One of the first ones is this is mine, strengthening shield laws concerning technology, which is protecting sources of the press when it comes to technology. That's very important. That's First Amendment stuff right there. The next one is one I've been getting a lot of statewide press on, which is requiring the option for event data recorders to either be turned off or require notification. Now it's kind of transitioned to require event data recorder information to belong to the individuals. So I'm expecting a huge battle out of this. 3 or 4 days ago, I got called by the main special interest lobby for the manufacturers saying, not only do we want to support this, we're completely behind you, and we want to ensure that to get this information, it's going to require a search warrant if you don't give it up. That just made this bill go from a 10 to 20% or maybe even 50% chance of passing to now 85, 90% chance of passing without it being watered down. That is a huge deal. So another one is prevent the state use of automated license plate scanners. In 2009, Montana banned red light cameras. Yeah. Last session, we banned drone usage and limited it severely. So now it is time to also prevent the startup of automated license plate scanners. One good thing about Montana is we're so far behind we don't have them yet. So we're going to ban it before we're committed. Okay, another one is facial recognition software. San Diego is starting to use this already, and they're testing it out, they're trying it out, so I can basically with my iPad take a picture and know who everybody is in this room as law enforcement. That's not okay. We need to stop that from happening before it even gets out. So that's another one I'm going to try to work on preventing the state from using, or vendors that the state can purchase, because that's the loophole right there. We want to, this is the holy grail of consent to obtain personal information. I'm going to try to, in the most simple way possible, but it's still going to it's already getting complex and getting a huge lobby against me, say that personal data belongs to the individual and define what that personal data is. If that one is kind of the pipe dream, but sometimes if you have one to be killed, the other ones might make it through. So we'll see about that. Reform and stop asset forfeiture. Do you guys know about that issue as much? So, hackers, when the cops come in, they break down your door, they say you're guilty for this, they get all your computers and they sell them off and keep the money, and then they found out that you're not guilty, but they've already sold off and kept the money, and you have to spend thousands of dollars in suing them, getting lawyers to get the money of what they've already sold off and kept. That's what we want to stop. That happens. So, yeah. God. And then continue the thing with the search warrants. We've had one success there. Require search warrants for all cell phone information, all email information, all social media information, all information. If you want it, get a warrant. Okay. So, let's pause right there. We're trying to do stuff at the state level. We've already been successful. Other states are trying to do it. It's happening. But what are the feds doing? Nothing. The USA Freedom Act? Joke. It's empty. It's been slaughtered. It's over 100 of the sponsors have now voted against it because it's a nothing bill. I have no faith in our federal government, to be honest. That's why I'm in state politics. It's true. But saying that, the government has checks and balances. Correct? Federal, executive, or judicial, executive, legislative. They're all supposed to check each other. Now they're all working together. Then the legislative branch, which is supposed to be of the people, is no longer the people with the 12% approval rating or lower. I think there's a saying that more people are more favorable of death than our U.S. Congress. So that's not a good thing. So the NSA, but there is a checks and balances. Didn't you know the NSA has its own secret courts that oversees its activities? That is also overseen by the NSA. So that's a joke right there. One last one, though, that is checks and balances no one really speaks of because they say it's not correct to speak of sometimes, is that of the people. If you accept it and allow it to go on, you are as guilty as the rest of us. What do you say? Peanut gallery back there. No, you're coming up here in a bit. All that is necessary for the triumph of evil is that good men do nothing. I am a complete believer in that. So I'm going to skip this one. It's a little bit long. It's a little bit too philosophical for 100 or 80 hungover individuals. So the firewall of freedom is kind of where it comes down to. We are in a new age that has not existed ever with where our technology is going, and sadly only a handful of people really can understand these concepts. Why am I speaking to you? Out of all the places I could be, all the people I can talk with, politically especially, why here? First off, I'll get to that in a second, but I want you to dwell on it. Why am I here? Most people really don't understand the concerns of what this data collection can bring us to, where we're actually already at and where we've been for a while. most people are worried about their self-preservation. Politicians are worried about re-election. It's true. They're worried about their financial matters, their personal agendas, and there's a handful of them who tend to be the ones who rise to the top politically who worry about power. They want it, and they find their ways of getting it. And like I said, example is the USA Freedom Act. So who has the tools necessary to stand up to our intrusive government? Why am I talking to you? Because you are some of the few people who I may be depending on sooner or later to stop some of these atrocities. I'm already speaking with hackers across the state and world who are helping me on legislation to work on such things as voting machines, which if you have vulnerable voting machines that can be hacked, you no longer have a democracy because each vote doesn't matter. You have who is the smartest person who can just sway the votes or hack the machines and change the votes. That's what we're already facing because all of our hacking machines, almost all of them, are very vulnerable. So again, who has the tools necessary to stand up to our intrusive government? You do. You may be some of the most important people in the future. I'm going to say the disclaimer first. As a disclaimer, I'm not suggesting anarchy and go hack everything and try to destroy it and blow it up and have a firestorm. Not what I'm saying. But let me do a little tangent. I'm in Montana. I know a few people who have their bunkers, their guns, their food all built up. They have more ammo than some of the stores are carrying right now. You know what? It's a way of life. It's kind of the people I represent because I'm a far-right, more libertarian kind of guy. So good on them. They're ready to stand up if there's anything that they think is an ill or wrongdoing. That is what they're there for. Are some of them a little in their own world? Definitely. Is it their right to be? Definitely. So with that, let's bring it back to the data collection. It is up to individuals, I firmly believe this, and our forefathers believed it as well, to stand up to those who abuse power, even if it is by our own government. We all know this data will be and has been abused, but no one will know until it's already possibly too late to what extent. When this injustice happens, those with the understanding and abilities will be the only ones who the rest of the population will rely on. This is especially true of all the data collected right now. We have all blackmail for those trying to stand up for something bigger than themselves. We already have the blackmail against us. A lot of us are just ready, waiting for the trigger to be pulled. With that, I will leave it and answer any questions anybody may have. And if you want to donate, you can donate, because $170 it can have a huge effect on my race, but it's not as much as $4,000. Don't think you're going to get a vote out of me, though. It doesn't work like that. Any questions? Yes, sir.
Amounts, are those minimums or maximums?
Maximums.
Okay.
I wish they were minimums. They can Just kidding. Anybody else? Yes.
Are there packs in Montana?
Are there what?
Packs.
Yes, there are, and I can donate, and I can accept, I think, 12 pack checks of $170 before I'm packed out. So it's not a huge amount. Oh, well then I can't know about it. That's how packs work. Actually, I'm amazed that there aren't more PACs trying to push this type of stuff in the data community, because there are PACs that I've seen for business, for conservative principles, religious principles, not one to help push those and get behind those who are pushing these causes.
What relationship do these new laws have on the Fourth Amendment?
They're all about protecting it. Almost all of them are about either defining who the property belongs to, which then defines it as your property, which then defines it as they need a search warrant to get it. It's all about the Fourth Amendment except the freedom of speech one, which is about the First Amendment, that is for not the freedom of the press, which is also another really important one. But that's what it's all about. And that's the one interesting thing about these I call it a gray market of data collection, the multi-billion-dollar industry, which I'm trying to put a finger in their eye. They don't like it because if we start changing their system, that's a lot of money. And what is money going to again? Money is power. So they don't want that change, that gray market. Yeah.
I'm wondering, you mentioned earlier that you'd banned drone use in Montana. I'm just wondering specifically what activities or devices you banned.
So this wasn't my legislation. There were more experienced people carrying this one who are also freedom-loving individuals. But I believe it was, let me think, that they couldn't have any weaponry, they couldn't be taking pictures to be used on land. I believe they need a search warrant. If you were used for a criminal case and the search warrant wasn't there, then the data would be thrown out. Basically, you can fly them, but anything you collect, use, and do on them is extremely limited. It was the end result after it went through both chambers. Okay, Hat.
You've talked a lot about legislation. Do you expect the NSA to follow the law?
Overruled.
So,
Re-education camp.
yeah. Well, you don't question here. No, California, really quick, I haven't watched it closely lately, but I think it passed out of the Senate a bill to say even the feds have to get search warrants for information of Californians that's being collected. So my state, my bill I had passed, there was an amendment put on it to say the feds are included, everything, and it would have been vetoed immediately. So we kept it back to the states. So the first thing, though, you have to realize is states tend to collect this information and share it with the feds. Organizations, Microsoft, Google, they collect the information. Companies, and share it with the feds. The feds don't collect it themselves. They have entities who do it for them. If I can limit the state entities that do it, I'm doing my part in my area. The problem is it takes 50 of us to do it. In a few days, I'm about to meet with the Fusion Center with colleagues across the board, Tea Party, ACLU, Democrat, I'm the Republican, who are going to meet with the Fusion Center, which is the entity that basically is the collector at the state level to share with the feds, and we're going to ask them through the Attorney General's office, what are you doing? How are you doing it? Why are you doing it? And we have a huge amount of questions we're going to ask, and we're going to see what they answer and if they answer anything. Again, if I can stop them, then there's less information going to the federal level. Do I expect them to listen to me? No, of course not. I'll do that at the state level on my. Once I get elected to Congress, I'll try that and go down in flames. But Justin Amash almost did that, and they didn't. Or he almost passed that amendment a few months ago to defund them, and it almost passed. Like I said, I have no faith in our feds right now, in our federal government, so I'll try to do what I can at the level I can do it at. Yes?
You've mentioned the ACLU several times. Have you worked with the EFF?
I've tried to a little bit, but they're more pushing national things. There's not an office that I know of in Montana, but right now, I've tried, but it's a little tougher. So if I work with them right now to get all my legislation ready, I can be, like I said, I can help push a lot of stuff through at the state level, hopefully, especially if it's very well written, to have an impact nationally. But some groups have a little bit thinner resources, is what I'd say. So, and they're worried about the USA Freedom Act, they're worried about what the NSA is doing. But I'm always, yeah. I've spoken to them a few times. Anybody else? I saw a few more hands in the back, or way out in time. I got done a little bit early. All right, well, make sure you follow me on Twitter. Because I know all you have that. No one actually has that in Montana. Only the press, and it seems to be the politicians. I still have a BlackBerry, so if you guys are hacking that, well, security through obscurity, and no, the state doesn't issue it. We get paid, so we're the 8th lowest paid legislature, so we basically volunteer everything. Security through obscurity, It is turned off. My wireless is turned off. If you see a BlackBerry, though, please don't hack it. I'd really appreciate that. Those pictures aren't mine. Also, I have business cards up here. If you want to support and donate or anything like that, I'm easy. But that's not why I'm here. Remember, you guys may be the most important people. People like me have to rely on in the future. So again, thank you very much, and I appreciate coming here. Thank you. And if you want to talk, I'll be outside for a little bit too if you want to meet up.